I'm James Morrison, I'm 34 years old, and at my own brother's wedding, in front of 250 people, my family demanded I give him my home, and he shoved me to the ground when I said no. Before I tell you how I used my skills as a lawyer to systematically dismantle their world without ever raising my voice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It's good to know who's listening. The wedding was at the Ritz-Carlton in Manhattan. You know the kind. Chandeliers that look like frozen waterfalls, waiters in tuxedos carrying silver trays, and the faint, sweet scent of money and lilies in the air. I should have felt proud. I'd paid for almost half of it, a gift to my younger brother, Nathan, to ensure his special day was perfect. But as I stood there in my tailored Tom Ford suit, I'd never felt more like an accessory. My parents, William and Margaret, were holding court near the entrance. My father, with his stern face and expensive Patek Philippe watch, a birthday gift from me, clapped Nathan on the back, his voice booming for everyone to hear. This is my son, Nathan, marrying the wonderful Eric Winters today. He's the one who's going to give us grandchildren, keep the family name alive. My mother, draped in pearls that I'd bought her for Christmas just months before, would occasionally glance my way and give me a tight, professional smile before turning back to her friends, the city's social elite. "Oh, James is here too," she'd say, her tone making it sound like an afterthought. "He's the lawyer. Always so busy with work, you know?" I wasn't just the lawyer. I was the one who'd bailed Nathan out of credit card debt twice. I was the one who co-signed the lease on his first Soho apartment when his credit was shot. I was the one who built a successful litigation firm from nothing, working 80-hour weeks while he was still figuring out his major in college for the third time. But in my family's eyes, my success wasn't a source of pride. It was a resource. I wasn't the golden child. I was the golden goose. The confrontation happened near the towering ice sculpture of two swans, a monument to a love I was beginning to doubt was real. My mother pulled me aside, her grip surprisingly strong on my arm. "James, darling," she began, her voice low and urgent. "Your father and I have been talking. Now that Nathan and Eric are married, they'll need a proper place to start a family." My father joined us, his expression leaving no room for argument. "That mansion of yours overlooking Central Park," he said, not asking, but stating a fact. "It's far too big for one person. It's an embarrassment of space. You're going to give it to them." I stared at them, the champagne in my hand suddenly feeling heavy. A wave of exhaustion washed over me. It was the same conversation, different day, different expensive backdrop. The demand for my car in college for Nathan's date night, the demand for my Hamptons share for his party weekend, the demand for my connections for his job hunt. It was always a demand, couched in the language of family duty. "You want me to give my brother my house? Don't be selfish, James," my mother hissed. "He's your family. What do you need all that space for? You don't even have a girlfriend. He's giving us a future. You've only given us money." That's when Nathan swaggered over, a smug grin on his face. "What's the holdup? I've already told Eric's parents all about our new place. Don't make me look like a liar." I finally found my voice. "No," I said. It was quiet, but it felt like a gunshot in the polite din of the party. "I'm not giving you my home. I earned it." Nathan's face twisted into an ugly sneer. "You're just a miserable workaholic. You wouldn't know what to do with a family if it hit you in the face." And then he shoved me. Hard. I was caught off guard. I stumbled backward, my heel catching on the thick carpet. I flailed, my arms windmilling as I crashed into a small table laden with champagne glasses. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the ballroom, silencing the music and the chatter. I landed in a heap on the floor, soaked in champagne, amidst the wreckage. A gasp went through the crowd. I saw Eric's mother, Victoria Winters, cover her mouth with a horrified hand. One of Nathan's groomsmen snickered. Then came the laughter. Not just a few titters, but a wave of open, humiliating laughter. And the worst part? My parents and Nathan were laughing the loudest. But as I looked down, my heart didn't break because of the laughter. It broke because of what I saw on my wrist. My cufflink, a simple, solid gold disc my grandmother had given me on the day I graduated from law school, was shattered. The fall had slammed it against the marble floor, cracking the face in two. She was the only one who had ever seen me, truly seen me. As I picked up the broken piece of gold, the laughter faded into a dull roar in my ears. The humiliation evaporated, replaced by something cold and hard and clear. This wasn't about a house anymore. They hadn't just pushed me down. They had desecrated a memory. And in that moment I decided they would pay for it. Not in a shouting match, not with fists, but in the one language I knew better than any of them: consequences. I didn't say a word. I simply stood up, brushed the glass from my suit, and walked out of the Ritz-Carlton without a backward glance. The doorman hailed me a cab, his eyes full of a pity I couldn't stand to look at. The ride back to my so-called mansion, a 3-bedroom apartment I'd bought with the first significant bonus from my firm, was silent. The city lights blurred past the window, but I saw none of them. All I could see was that broken piece of gold in my palm. My home, usually a sanctuary of calm and order, felt vast and empty. I walked over to my desk, a large mahogany piece that looked out over the twinkling expanse of Central Park, and carefully placed the two halves of the cufflink on the polished surface. They lay there, a testament to a line that had just been crossed. For years, I had built a fortress around my heart to deal with my family. I'd learned to absorb the casual insults, the blatant favoritism, the endless demands disguised as family duty. I'd become a master of emotional compartmentalization. But seeing that cufflink broken had breached all my defenses. It was a physical manifestation of what they had been doing to my spirit my entire life. Taking something precious and shattering it without a second thought. My hand shook as I picked up my phone. I didn't scroll through my contacts. I made one call, the only one that mattered. "Riley," I said when he answered. My voice came out raspy, tight. "James? What's wrong? You left the wedding without saying goodbye. Is everything okay?" Riley Thompson had been my best friend since we were struggling associates at the same law firm, sharing cheap pizza at our desks at midnight. He knew my family's dynamic better than anyone. I couldn't bring myself to describe the fall, the laughter. The words felt too humiliating. Instead, I focused on the one thing that had cut me to the core. "He broke Grandma's cufflink," I said. There was a moment of pregnant silence on the other end of the line. Riley knew exactly what that meant. He didn't need any more details. "That bastard," he finally breathed, his voice low and furious. "That's it. That's the last straw. I'm coming over." "No," I said, looking at the broken pieces. "Not yet. I need to think." "What are you going to do? Yell at them? That never works." "No," I said, a new coldness creeping into my voice. "No more yelling. I'm done playing their game." "Then what? You can't just let this go, James. Not this time." "I'm not going to let it go," I assured him. "This time, I'm going to burn it all down. Legally. Professionally." After I hung up, the memories came, unbidden. Not warm, fuzzy recollections, but a highlight reel of a lifetime of being treated as a utility, each memory a sharp, distinct scene. I was 24, just out of law school and drowning in over $100,000 of student debt. The phone rang at 2 a.m. It was Nathan, his voice a panicked whisper from a payphone. "James? I'm in trouble. Real trouble." "What is it, Nathan? Where are you?" "Atlantic City. I got into a poker game. I thought I could win. I lost. A lot." "How much?" I asked, my stomach sinking. $5 grand, he mumbled. "They have my driver's license. They said they know where Mom and Dad live. They're not nice people, James." I looked at my own bank account online. The balance was $5,842.17. It was every penny I had saved, the money I was going to use for a down payment on a reliable used car to get to my first real job. I closed my eyes. "Give me the account number," I sighed. I wired him the money. The next day, he sent a one-word text, "Tichex." At Thanksgiving dinner a month later, he was showing off a brand-new Tag Heuer watch. My mother beamed. "Isn't it wonderful?" she said to the table. "Nathan's learning to appreciate the finer things." My father nodded in approval. "It's good to see you're learning the value of $1, son." I just sat there, eating my dry turkey, feeling like a fool. I was 30, celebrating my partnership at my old firm. It was a huge deal, the culmination of years of sleepless nights and sacrificed weekends. I'd invited my parents to a celebratory dinner at Per Se, a restaurant I couldn't have dreamed of affording just a few years earlier. "This is very impressive, James," my father said, swirling his wine and looking around the opulent dining room. He didn't say, "I'm proud of you." He said, "Now that you have a stable, significant income, you can finally help fund that tech startup idea Nathan has. He's got real vision. All he needs is capital. It's about time you invested in family instead of just your own career." My mother reached across the table and patted my hand. "It would be so wonderful, darling, to see our two boys working together. You, the money, and him, the ideas. Perfect team." My achievement, my moment, was instantly reframed. I wasn't their successful son. I was the venture capitalist for their favored one. I remember the taste of ashes in my mouth as I ate my expensive steak, the stunning view of Columbus Circle completely lost on me. But then, a different kind of memory surfaced, a memory that was a sanctuary. A warm one. I was 12, and my grandmother, Eleanor, was sitting with me in her small, sunlit garden in Queens, surrounded by the scent of roses and freshly turned earth. She was the only one who listened when I talked about my dreams, my fears. On the day I got my acceptance letter to Columbia Law, she presented me with a small, worn velvet box. Inside were the gold cufflinks. They had been my grandfather's. "Your grandfather was a man of integrity, James," she had told me, her eyes clear and bright. "He wasn't the richest man, but he was the most respected. He believed that justice was the one thing no one could ever take from you. Money, houses, they can come and go. But your character, your word, that's the real fortune. Don't ever let anyone, not even family, take that from you. Promise me." I promised. Looking at the broken cufflink now, I realized they had tried. For years, they had tried to chip away at my character, to make me feel that my only value was what I could provide. They wanted to take my house, yes, but what they really wanted to take was my self-worth, the very fortune my grandmother had told me to protect. The doorman, Luis, buzzed up, his voice discreet over the intercom. "Mr. Morrison, your brother is in the lobby. He's making a scene, sir, demanding to be let up." My voice was steady, colder than I'd ever heard it. "Luis, you are not to allow Nathan Morrison into this building. Not now, not ever. If he refuses to leave, please inform him you will call the police. Is that understood?" "Perfectly, sir," Luis replied, and there was a note of satisfaction in his voice. He'd been the silent witness to years of Nathan showing up unannounced, expecting a handout or a favor. "He's been like this for years, Mr. Morrison, always expecting you to fix his problems." "Not this time, Luis," I said. "This time, he's going to have to fix his own." I hung up and my phone immediately buzzed again. It was a text from Riley. "I know a guy, a reporter for the Times, David Rodriguez. He covers the high society beat. He owes me a favor. Do you want to burn it all down? Burn it all down." The phrase echoed in my mind. No, I didn't want to burn it all down in a blaze of glory. That was Nathan's style. I wanted to dismantle it, brick by brick. I wanted to use the very tools I had honed my entire life, logic, evidence, and the relentless pursuit of the facts, to show them what real power looked like. It wasn't about shouting matches or public brawls. It was about a well-executed strategy. I looked at the email address Riley had sent. David Rodriguez. I took a deep breath, the air in my lungs feeling clean and cold for the first time all night. I opened a new email. My fingers flew across the keyboard, not with anger, but with the chilling precision of a litigator preparing his opening statement. I was no longer the son, the brother, the ATM. I was counsel for the prosecution, and my family had no idea what was coming for them. I met David Rodriguez 2 days later at a quiet coffee shop in the West Village, far from the prying eyes of my family's social circle. He was a small, wiry man with a notepad and eyes that missed nothing. I expected a vulture, someone looking for a salacious story. Instead, I found a professional. "Riley told me the basics," he said after we ordered. "A family dispute at a wedding. But he said there was more to it. He said it was a story about power and entitlement in this city. So lay it on me. Why should my readers care?" I didn't give him a tearful, emotional account. I laid it out like I would for a judge. I presented the facts. I started with the wedding, the demand, the assault. Then I went deeper. I gave him sanitized, anonymous versions of the Atlantic City incident and the partnership dinner. I detailed a pattern of behavior, a history of financial demands and emotional manipulation. I framed it not as a personal vendetta, but as an example of a phenomenon he might find interesting: the private pressures faced by successful, self-made individuals from their entitled families. I was calm. I was credible. I had dates and figures. I was a perfect source. David listened intently, his pen flying across the page. "You're not worried about the blowback?" he asked, finally looking up. "This will get ugly." "The blowback already happened," I said, my voice even. I was publicly humiliated at a family event. My character was attacked. I'm simply choosing to control the narrative this time. I'm defining what happened, instead of letting them define me. He nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "This is good," he said. "This is more than just a gossip piece. It's a cultural commentary." The article appeared 48 hours later, not in the main paper, but on page 6, the New York Post's notorious gossip column, which David also freelanced for. It was a calculated move. A story in the Times might have been too serious. A story on page 6 was a social grenade. The headline was a masterpiece of sensationalism. "Manhattan lawyer assaulted at brother's Ritz wedding over Central Park mansion." The story was carefully worded, quoting witnesses at the lavish affair and sources close to the family. It didn't name me directly, but the details were specific enough that anyone who was there, or anyone in our social sphere, knew exactly who it was about. It painted a picture of a spoiled golden child and his grasping parents trying to bully a successful son out of his hard-earned home. My phone started blowing up before I'd even finished my morning coffee. The first call was from my mother. "James, what have you done?" she shrieked, her voice a cocktail of fury and panic. There was no hello. "No, are you okay?" "I'm not sure what you mean, Mother," I said calmly, taking a sip of coffee. "It's everywhere. Page 6. Everyone is calling me. Do you know what Patricia de la Renta said to me at the charity luncheon?" "Nothing. She just stared at me." "You've made us a laughingstock." I believe the laughingstock was me on the floor of the Ritz-Carlton, covered in champagne, I replied, my voice dangerously quiet. "You seemed to find it quite amusing at the time." "You are a selfish, ungrateful child," she spat. "After everything we've done for you, we gave you life. And I have built that life myself," I countered. "Let's not get into a debate about the past. I have a meeting to get to. You will fix this. You will issue a retraction. You will tell everyone it was a misunderstanding." "No," I said simply. "I will not." I hung up the phone, my hand steady. The old guilt, the familiar sting of her disapproval, was gone. All I felt was a cold sense of clarity. The next call was one I didn't expect. It was from a restricted number. "Is this James Morrison?" a gruff, older voice asked. "Who is this?" "You don't know me. My name is Derek Morrison. I'm your father's brother, Uncle Derek." He'd been excommunicated from the family before I was born. I'd only heard whispers about him, that he was a failure, that he'd betrayed my grandfather. "I read the article," he said, his voice heavy. "A friend sent it to me down here in Florida. Listen, kid, I'm calling to tell you one thing. It's not you. It's them. It's the family curse. Your father did the exact same thing to me 35 years ago with my construction business. He called it family equity. I called it theft. Don't let them break you like they broke me." The call left me reeling. This wasn't just my fight. This was a pattern. a generational sickness. Meanwhile, the grenade had hit its other target. That afternoon, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was, "The Wedding." It was from Victoria Winters, Eric's mother. The email was short and to the point. She expressed her horror at what she witnessed and what she had since read. She informed me that she had spoken with her son, and that Eric had been completely unaware of Nathan's disgraceful scheme. The most damning line was the last one. "Nathan led us to believe the property was a wedding gift, secured months ago. It is clear now that he is not the man we thought he was. I am deeply sorry for any part my family played in this deception." She had just handed me a nuke. Nathan hadn't just been entitled. He had been actively lying to his new family for months. He hadn't just tried to take my home. He'd used it as a fraudulent asset to secure his marriage. That evening, another unexpected call came through. It was Judge Margaret Chen. I'd appeared in her courtroom a few times and had met her briefly at the wedding before the disaster. She was a legend in the New York legal community, known for her sharp mind and no-nonsense attitude. "Mr. Morrison," she said, her voice crisp. "I was a guest at that wedding. I saw what happened. I've also read the news. As a private citizen, I found it appalling. As a judge, I find the pattern of behavior it suggests deeply troubling." "Thank you, Judge. I appreciate that." "Appreciation is nice, but action is better," she said. "You're a fine litigator, Morrison, but you're in a PR war now. You need a different kind of general. Have you retained counsel?" "Not yet," I admitted. "Good. I know someone. Amanda Walsh. She's the best reputation management attorney in this city. She's a shark and she's who you need. I've already taken the liberty of speaking with her. She's expecting your call." She paused, and her voice became more serious. "And Mr. Morrison, a word of advice. Don't think of this as an expense. Think of it as an investment in your own liberation." I hung up, stunned. An estranged uncle, the mother of the groom, a respected judge, my fortress of solitude, was suddenly full of unexpected allies. I looked up Amanda Walsh. Her firm's office was on Park Avenue. Her client list was a who's who of embattled CEOs and celebrities. The initial retainer fee, listed on her website, was more than I paid for my first car. I didn't hesitate. I picked up the phone and made the appointment. I was investing in my liberation. The final call of the day was from my father. His tone wasn't panicked like my mother's. It was cold, hard, and full of menace. "I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing," he began, his voice low. "It's not a game, Father. You are damaging this family. You are damaging my business, my reputation. You will call that reporter and you will retract the story. You will tell them you were drunk and fell. You will fix this mess you've created." I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. I could hear his heavy breathing on the other end. The old me, the boy who craved his approval, would have crumbled. But that boy was gone. "I won't be doing any of that," I said, my voice as cold as his. "And any further communication can be directed to my lawyer." I hung up the phone. The storm had begun, and for the first time in my life, I was ready to sail right into the heart of it. Amanda Walsh's office was exactly what you'd expect. Minimalist, modern, with a sprawling view of the city that screamed power. Amanda herself was a woman in her 50s with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that could probably see through lead. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Judge Chen filled me in," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "I've reviewed the article and the background you sent over. Your family is playing checkers. We're going to play chess. But first, I need to know, are you ready for this? Really ready? Because we're going to escalate. There's no going back." "I've been going back my whole life," I said. "I'm ready to go forward." "Good," she said with a thin smile. "Because your parents and brother think this is a family spat that can be solved with guilt and shouting. We're going to turn it into a legal matter, a place where their tactics are useless." We spent an hour brainstorming. We discussed and dismissed a lawsuit for assault and battery. "Too messy," Amanda said. "It becomes a he said, she said. You want to be the calm, rational party here, not the litigious son." Her plan was more elegant and far more potent. "They are harassing you," she stated. "Your mother's calls, your father's threats. It's a pattern. So we formalize it. We're going to send them a cease and desist letter. We'll serve it to them formally via a process server. It's a legal shot across the bow." It was a classic lawyer's move, but applied to my own family, it felt radical. It was a formal declaration that the old rules were dead. We were no longer operating under the vague, manipulative umbrella of family. We were now operating under the clear, unyielding framework of the law. Amanda drafted it herself. The language was cold, precise, and brutal in its professionalism. It detailed the incident at the wedding, the subsequent calls, the veiled threats from my father. It formally demanded that William, Margaret, and Nathan Morrison cease all contact with me. Phone, email, text, or in person. Any future communication would have to go through her office. It also noted that we were documenting all instances of harassment for potential future legal action. "This will drive them insane," I said, reading the draft. A part of me, the old part, flinched at the coldness of it. "That's the point," Amanda replied, her eyes sharp. "It takes their primary weapon, emotional manipulation, off the table. It forces them into our arena, the law. They won't know what to do." While Amanda prepared the legal assault, I handled the personal front. I met my Uncle Derek for lunch at a quiet diner in his neighborhood. He was a man who looked older than his years, with my father's jawline but kinder eyes. He was hesitant at first, years of being the family pariah having made him wary. "I never thought I'd talk to one of William's kids," he said, stirring his iced tea. "I'm glad you called." I told him sincerely, "I need to understand. Tell me everything." And so he told me. It wasn't just a summary. It was a painful reliving. He described how he had built a small, successful construction company in the 80s, pouring his life into it. My father, William, who was then struggling with his own import-export business, had demanded that Derek make him a full partner, arguing that he, as the older brother with a family to support, deserved a piece of the success. "He said it was my duty," Derek recalled, his eyes distant, "that I owed it to the family name. When I refused, he and your grandparents systematically turned everyone against me. William told my biggest client I was cutting corners on materials. He told my suppliers I had a gambling problem and was a credit risk. Lies. All of it. But they were his family. Who were they going to believe? "What did you do?" I asked, leaning forward. "I fought them," he said with a sigh. "I yelled. I screamed. I made scenes at holiday dinners. And I lost. They painted me as unstable, emotional, difficult. I was so busy being angry, I didn't see they were gutting my business from the inside out. I sold the company for pennies on the dollar and moved to Florida with my tail between my legs." He looked me straight in the eye, his gaze intense. "Don't make my mistake, James. Don't get emotional. Use your head. You're smarter than he is. Don't fight him on his terms. Fight him on yours. He expects you to yell. So whisper. He expects you to be emotional. So be rational. Hit him with paper, not with your fists." He reached into an old briefcase and pulled out a faded manila folder. Inside were old letters. Letters from my grandfather urging Derek to do the right thing for the family. A carbon copy of a letter from my father outlining his rightful share of the business. It was my story, written 35 years earlier. "I don't know if these are legally useful," Derek said, pushing the folder across the table. "But I want you to have them. It's time the truth came out. Let him see his own words again." This meeting was the final piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just my pain. It was a legacy of abuse. The guilt I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. The deep-seated childhood fear that maybe I was the problem, that I was the selfish one, evaporated completely. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for him, too. I was fighting for the truth. A few days later, the process server, a stoic ex-cop named Marcus, confirmed that the cease and desist letters had been delivered to my parents' townhouse and Nathan's apartment. The older gentleman looked like he was going to have a stroke, Marcus reported with a deadpan expression. The lady slammed the door. The younger guy just looked confused. The silence that followed was deafening. No angry calls, no panic texts. It was the quiet before a much larger storm. I knew they were plotting. They wouldn't take this lying down. But this time I wasn't waiting for the storm to hit me. I was standing in the eye of it, calm and prepared, with the law as my shield and the truth as my sword. They thought this was still a family dispute. They had no idea they were about to walk into a legal ambush of my own design. About a week after the cease and desist letters were delivered, the invitation came. It was an email from my mother. The subject line read, "Family Dinner." The tone was sickeningly sweet, a transparent attempt at diplomacy that was as phony as a $3 bill. "Dearest James," it began, "your father and I feel there has been a terrible misunderstanding. Things have gotten out of hand, and we want to sit down as a family and heal these wounds. Please come to dinner on Saturday night, just us, for a chance to talk and to forgive." I forwarded it to Amanda. Her reply was instantaneous. "It's an ambush. They're ignoring the letter, which is a gift. They're trying to drag you back onto their turf for one last emotional assault. We should go." "We?" I asked. "No, you," she clarified. "But you will go prepared. They're expecting the wounded son. They're going to get the prosecutor." For the next 2 days, Amanda and I prepared for that dinner like it was a Supreme Court hearing. We compiled everything into a sleek, black leather briefcase. It was my armor. Inside were copies of every document. The cease and desist letter, the email from Victoria Winters, the damning letters from Uncle Derek's past, and the centerpiece of our strategy, a meticulously prepared financial audit. When I arrived at my parents' Upper East Side townhouse on Saturday, the air was thick with false sincerity. My mother greeted me at the door with a hug that felt like a cage. My father stood by the fireplace, trying to look patriarchal and forgiving. Nathan was on the couch, looking sullen and out of his depth. And to my surprise, there was a fourth person. Their family pastor, Reverend Michael, a man I hadn't seen in years, sitting there with a beatific smile. The ambush was even more blatant than I'd imagined. They'd brought in God as a reinforcement. We sat down in the formal dining room, the same room where every holiday had been a masterclass in my family's toxic dynamics. My mother had cooked my favorite meal from childhood, pot roast, another calculated move designed to evoke nostalgia and soften me up. After a few minutes of excruciating small talk about the weather, my father cleared his throat, placing his hands on the table as if presiding over a boardroom. "James," he began, his voice dripping with condescending authority, "we are all here because we love you, and because we are a family, and families forgive. They overlook mistakes. Your brother made a mistake." My mother chimed in, her eyes pleading. "He was emotional. You know how he is. He's passionate. But this legal action, it's not who we are. It's cold. It's cruel." Reverend Michael leaned forward, his hands clasped. "James, the Bible teaches us about forgiveness, about honoring thy father and mother. A house is just bricks and mortar, but family is eternal. Surely you can find it in your heart to let go of this anger." They kept talking, their words weaving a familiar web of guilt, obligation, and shame. Forgive, forget, family. The words they had used my whole life to manage me, to keep me in my place. I let them. I sat in silence, my hands resting on the briefcase in my lap. I watched them, listened to them, and felt nothing but a profound, final detachment. They weren't my family. They were the opposing counsel. When they finally wound down, a hopeful silence falling over the room as they waited for my tearful apology, I simply reached down and placed the briefcase on the table with a soft, definitive thud. I clicked it open. "I appreciate you all sharing your perspectives," I said, my voice calm and even. The shift in my tone made them all sit up a little straighter. "Now, I'd like to share some documents." I slid the first folder across the polished wood towards my father. "This is a copy of the cease and desist letter you received and chose to ignore. It is now Exhibit A in a documented pattern of harassment." My father's face tightened, a muscle jumping in his jaw. I slid a second folder towards my mother. This is a sworn affidavit from your brother-in-law, Derek Morrison, detailing how you and father systematically destroyed his business 35 years ago, using the exact same tactics of familial pressure and reputation slander. He also provided some fascinating correspondence from that time, written in father's own hand. My mother paled, her hand flying to her pearl necklace. I looked at Reverend Michael. And this, Reverend, is a copy of an email from Victoria Winters, confirming that my brother fraudulently represented my home as his own to his new family for months prior to the wedding. I'm not a theologian, but I'm fairly certain that bearing false witness on that scale is frowned upon. The pastor's benevolent smile vanished. He suddenly found the pattern on his plate intensely interesting. The room was silent. The color was draining from their faces. But I wasn't finished. I saved the main event for Nathan. I pulled out a thick, spiral-bound document and placed it in front of him. "And Nathan?" I said, my voice softening slightly, which somehow made it more menacing. "You know, after our last conversation, I've been thinking, and I've changed my mind." A flicker of desperate hope appeared in his eyes. "You can have the mansion," I said. My mother gasped. My father stared, confused. Nathan looked like he'd won the lottery. "Really, James?" he breathed. "Really?" I confirmed. "On one condition." I tapped the thick document. "This is a full accounting, prepared by a forensic accountant, of every dollar I have ever given you, loaned you, or paid on your behalf since you turned 18. Tuition, rent, car payments, credit card bailouts, the $5,000 for that bookie in Atlantic City. It's all in here with dates and receipts. The total, with a very conservative interest rate applied, comes to $1,742,500.38. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. "Pay me back," I said, my voice a whisper that cut through the silence. "You write me a check for what you owe me, and the house is yours tomorrow. Here's the invoice." Nathan stared at the document as if it were a venomous snake. He flipped through a few pages, his eyes wide with disbelief. The bravado, the entitlement, it all dissolved in an instant, replaced by the slack-jawed panic of a man who had just been presented with the bill for his entire life. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Finally, I turned to my mother. The anger was gone from my voice, replaced by a genuine, aching sadness. "I looked at the pieces of that broken cufflink all week," I said, "and all I could think was, Grandma would be so ashamed. Not of me, but of what you've all become." That was the kill shot. The legal documents were a fortress. That final sentence was a dagger to the heart. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact, a final, sorrowful judgment. I stood up, leaving the documents spread across the table like the aftermath of a surgical strike. "Thank you for dinner," I said to the silent, shell-shocked room. "I will not be seeing any of you again." I picked up my empty briefcase, turned my back on them, and walked out the door, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the tomb-like silence of the house that was no longer my home. I wasn't running away. I was being released. The days following that dinner were eerily quiet. I had expected explosions, furious phone calls to Amanda's office, desperate attempts to contact me. But there was nothing. It was the silence of a defeated army. I had not only won the battle, I had obliterated their will to fight. They knew, finally, that the rules had changed permanently, and they had no moves left to make. The real fallout happened not with a bang, but with a series of quiet, devastating implosions in their own lives. I didn't have to do anything more. I just had to sit back and watch the consequences of their own actions ripple outwards. The first domino to fall was Nathan's marriage. About a month after the dinner, I received a package by messenger. It was a small, elegant box from Tiffany's. Inside, on a bed of velvet, was a single, unbroken solid gold cufflink, a perfect match to my grandmother's set, and a handwritten note on thick, cream-colored stationery. "Mr. Morrison," it read, "I am sorry for what happened at my wedding and for the part one unwittingly played in your family's drama. The enclosed is a small token of my regret. As of today, Nathan and I are legally separated. I wish you peace. Sincerely, Eric Winters. I learned the details later from Riley, whose network of gossiping law clerks heard everything. Eric, armed with the truth from his mother and the sheer audacity of the invoice I'd presented, had confronted Nathan. The fight hadn't been about my mansion, but about the fundamental dishonesty it represented. Eric came from old money, a world where reputation and integrity were everything. He hadn't married a charismatic charmer. He had married a fraud. It wasn't that you wanted the house, Eric had apparently told him. It was that you lied about it. To me, to my parents. If you can lie about that, you can lie about anything. The sham marriage, built on a foundation of lies, had crumbled under the first real pressure. Nathan, cut off from the Winters family fortune, was forced to move back into my parents' townhouse. A 30-year-old divorce with no job and no prospects. The next domino was my father's business. William Morrison had built his import-export company on a network of handshakes and country club connections. His reputation as a stern but powerful family man was his primary asset. But my story, which had started on page 6, had spread through the tight-knit circles of New York's business elite. It was no longer just gossip. It was a character reference. I witnessed a piece of this myself. I was having lunch with a client when I saw my father at a nearby table, deep in conversation with a group of German businessmen. This was the big manufacturing deal I'd heard he was trying to close. I watched as my father laughed, projecting his usual aura of command. Then one of the Germans saw me, recognized me from a legal journal profile, and whispered to his colleague. The mood at my father's table shifted. The smiles became tighter. The meeting ended shortly after. Days later, my client, who knew the Germans' legal counsel, told me the deal was dead. They said they had concerns about his character, my client explained. Something about family troubles. They believe a man who can't manage his own house can't be trusted to manage their business. The loss of that one deal started a cascade. Other partners grew wary. Credit lines were tightened. My father, who had always projected an aura of absolute control, was suddenly seen as tainted, the patriarch of a dysfunctional and greedy clan. His business wasn't failing because of anything I did directly. It was failing because the mask had been ripped off, and the world finally saw the man underneath. The last call I ever received from Nathan came late one Tuesday night. His number flashed on my screen, and for a moment, I considered not answering. But I needed to close this door myself. "What do you want, Nathan?" I asked, my voice flat. He was sobbing. It was the same pathetic, blubbering sound I'd heard that night he called from the casino. "James, you have to help me," he cried. "Eric left me. He's taking everything. Dad's business is falling apart. The country club suspended their membership. Our friends won't even talk to us. You've ruined us." The blame. Always the blame. "I didn't do anything, Nathan," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "I just stopped letting you do things to me. Everything that's happening now. This is the bill for your life. It's the consequences of your choices." "But I'm your brother," he wailed. "We used to build forts in the living room. Remember that?" "I'm sorry. Please, I just need some money to get back on my feet. I need you to fix this." The mention of the forts, a weak attempt to grasp at a shared history he had long since betrayed, just solidified my resolve. "I have a question for you, Nathan," I said. "When you shoved me at your wedding, what did you think was going to happen? Did you think I'd just get up, dust myself off, and hand you the keys to my house?" He was silent, except for his ragged breathing. "You didn't think at all, did you?" I continued. "You've never had to. You've spent your whole life expecting me to absorb the consequences of your actions. But that service is no longer available." I took a breath. "Goodbye, Nathan." I hung up the phone before he could reply. I blocked his number, then my parents' numbers. It wasn't an act of anger. It was an act of housekeeping. A final, quiet cleaning out of the toxic waste that had cluttered my life for far too long. The storm had passed, and the silence that remained was the sound of my own freedom. A year can change everything. The James Morrison who walked out of his parents' townhouse was not the same man who now stood in the living room of his own home. The mansion, the object of so much greed and conflict, had been transformed. It was no longer just a symbol of my success, but a center for my purpose. One of the spare bedrooms, once an empty space I never entered, was now a fully functioning office. But it wasn't for my lucrative litigation work. 2 evenings a week, it became the base for the Eleanor Project, a pro bono legal clinic I'd started in my grandmother's name. We provided free legal advice to people from disadvantaged backgrounds who were fighting battles against powerful institutions, predatory landlords, and scrupulous employers, insurance companies. And I wasn't alone. My co-counsel on the project was Sophia Chen. After the wedding disaster, she had reached out, initially just to express her support. But we discovered a shared frustration with a legal system that so often favored the wealthy. She was a brilliant lawyer working in public interest law, and she'd been looking for a way to have more impact. We started as colleagues, fueled by a shared passion for justice. Tonight, we were working late, prepping a young single mother for a hearing against her landlord, who was trying to illegally evict her. "He's trying to intimidate you," I told our client, a nervous young woman named Maria. "He's counting on you not knowing your rights." Sophia chimed in, her voice calm and reassuring. "But we do know them, and we'll be right there with you. You're not alone in this." Watching Maria's face change from fear to determination, I felt a satisfaction deeper than any multimillion-dollar settlement I'd ever won. After Maria left, Sophia and I were cleaning up. "You're good at this," she said quietly. "You give people hope." "I'm just passing on what my grandmother taught me," I said. "That justice is a fortune worth fighting for." Our professional respect had blossomed into a deep, easy affection. Our relationship wasn't built on need or dependency, but on a foundation of mutual admiration and shared values. It was the healthiest thing I'd ever known. My chosen family had become the real family in my life. The house was often filled with laughter. Riley would come over for game nights, bringing his signature terrible jokes. Amanda Walsh, who had become a genuine friend and mentor, would join us for dinner, offering sharp, witty commentary on politics and law. Uncle Derek, having sold his small condo in Florida, had moved into a retirement community just across town, and he was a regular Sunday brunch guest, regaling us with stories of old New York. One Sunday, he raised his glass of orange juice in a toast. "To James," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "who taught an old dog that you don't have to get mad. You just have to get smarter." We all clinked glasses, a motley crew brought together by circumstance, bound by loyalty. My life was full, not with the empty obligations of blood relations, but with the rich, meaningful connections I had forged myself. One crisp autumn afternoon, a letter arrived. The handwriting on the envelope was familiar. It was from my mother. I almost threw it away. My finger hovered over the trash can. But curiosity, a final lingering thread, made me open it. Inside, there was no long, pleading letter. No excuses. No demands. There was just a cashier's check for a small, specific amount, $500, and a single line written on a plain note card. "For the cufflink." I stared at the check for a long time. The amount was meaningless. $500 couldn't repair a lifetime of damage. It couldn't erase the years of being treated as a means to an end. It wasn't an apology. It was far from a full accounting of the debt they owed, a debt that wasn't financial. But it was something. It was an acknowledgement, a tiny, imperfect gesture of remorse. The line I had delivered at that final dinner, "Grandma would be so ashamed," had apparently done its work. It hadn't sparked a miraculous transformation, but it had planted a seed of shame that had finally borne this small, bitter fruit. It wasn't about her becoming a better person overnight. It was about her, for one brief moment, being forced to confront the person she had become. The old me might have seen this as an opening, a chance for reconciliation. A part of me, a deeply buried, younger part, felt a flicker of that old hope. But the new me, the man who had fought for his own peace, knew better. Forgiveness wasn't about letting them back into my life. It was about letting them go completely. Their healing, if it ever came, was their own journey now, not mine. I walked over to my desk and endorsed the check. But I didn't deposit it into my own account. I made it out to the Juilliard School's Music Scholarship Fund, a charity my grandmother, a passionate amateur pianist, had supported her whole life. I placed it in a new envelope, sealed it, and dropped it in the mail. I didn't need their money. I didn't need their penance. By turning their gesture into an act of charity in my grandmother's name, I was taking the last bit of power they had over me and transforming it into something good, something that was entirely my own. It was the final, quiet move in our chess game, and it was checkmate. The city is quiet from my window tonight. The endless river of headlights on the streets below looks like a string of jewels. For so long, I looked out at this same view and felt a sense of pride mixed with a deep, gnawing loneliness. The house was a fortress I had built to prove my worth to people who would never see it. Now it's just home. On my desk, next to a photo of my grandmother, is a framed letter. It arrived last week. It's from a young man, a first-generation college student who received assistance from the Eleanor Project. "I was on the verge of dropping out," he wrote. "My family kept telling me I was being selfish for pursuing my dreams instead of getting a job to help them pay their bills. They said I owed them. Reading your story on the project's website made me realize that the only thing I owe is to my own potential. You gave me the courage to set boundaries, to tell them that supporting me wasn't a burden, but an investment in our collective future. Thank you for showing me it's possible to break the cycle." I read that letter every few days. It reminds me that standing up for yourself is rarely just about you. My battle started in a lavish ballroom, over a piece of property and a broken piece of gold. It felt so personal, so isolating. But the ripples from that one decision, the decision to finally say no, had traveled further than I could have ever imagined. It had created a space for others to find their own voice. I looked at the matching gold cufflink from Eric, gleaming on my dresser. I had put it together with the unbroken one from my grandmother's set. They were a pair again. One represented the past, the legacy of integrity she had given me. The other represented the future, a gesture of respect earned, not demanded. Together, they told a complete story. My real victory wasn't in that silent, defeated dining room. It wasn't in the news of Nathan's divorce or my father's failing business. Those were just the inevitable consequences of a rotten foundation. The real victory is here, in this quiet room. It's the peace in my own heart. It's the sound of Sophia's laughter from the other room as she talks to Riley on the phone. It's the knowledge that the mansion they tried to take from me has become a launchpad for others' dreams. I finally understood what my grandmother meant. They could shove me, laugh at me, try to take my house and my money. But they couldn't take my character. They couldn't take the justice I fought for, first for myself and now for others. I didn't destroy my family. I simply refused to let them destroy me. And that has made all the difference. Freedom, I've learned, isn't about winning the war. It's about choosing not to play their game anymore. It's about building your own table instead of begging for a seat at theirs. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it has touched you in some way. Have you ever had to face a similar situation where you had to choose between yourself and toxic family expectations? Please share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.